Cybersecurity concerns are ever evolving. OT cybersecurity is even more complex, and it's so much more than just software and hardware. How do you stay on top of it all? Aaron Crow has over 25 years experience with cybersecurity, 15 of those years focused on operational technology across multiple industries, and he wants to help you. Welcome to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Industrial Defender. Now here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Awesome. So, hey, I'm very excited about this conversation. We've been working on this a little bit. We actually tried to meet up at DEF CON. We just got back from DEF CON in Black Hat. We weren't able to make it work. We were both too busy. But, Michael, thank you for being here. I do see the jet in the background. We were just talking about that and the awesome background there. So why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, and what are you guys doing over there?
Aaron, thank you so much for hosting me. My name is Michael Weigand. I'm the co-founder and chief growth officer at Shift5. And Shift5 is a company focused on making our fleets, both within the defense community, weapon systems, and within commercial aerospace and rail, smarter and safer. What we do at the company here is we build hardware and software that instrument all of the nervous systems that make our modern vehicles, these really expensive systems like satellites, combat aircraft, airliners like the ones flying past me in the background here, landing at DCA. We instrument that so that we can collect data off of it, ensure that those systems are secure, that there's no malware on any of the edge computers, and then use the collected data also to try and improve the operational readiness of those platforms so that we can bring some cost savings back as we're trying to make the world a little better and a little safer.
Yeah, that's so important. You know, I've been doing this a long time, and even before we called this OT cybersecurity and we were really looking at that, I always was having to justify how am I going to, where's this money coming from? Because this wasn't budgeted. Like, this is expensive. It's a bolt-on. It's a cost center more than it was providing value. But when you can focus on what can I bring to improve your operational reliability, improve efficiency, anything that I can do to help out on the operational side. And then cyber is just an added bonus. It's an additional, kind of flip the script of the operational being the most important, which we see in OT all the time because availability is way more important than anything else in the space, is safety and availability. And that just dives further into really, I need to understand what the operational reliability, what all of those things together before the cyber things just check the box, right?
Yeah, Aaron, it's actually, I think, integrated into our own startup story, if you will.
Right.
When Shift5 was founded, I had come out of the military where I was a cyber officer, and I was very focused on defending our weapon systems from cyber attack. I wanted to start this company with my co-founders so that we could build the hardware and software solutions that are the foundation of defending any kind of asset. The first thing that you need to do before you can defend a network is be able to see it. And what we learned is that, when we're talking about commercial aircraft or locomotives in a rail context, and many of our weapon systems, that onboard operational technology, the MIL standard 1553 data buses, the ARINC 429 and 629, networks that allow all those onboard computers, sometimes called line replaceable units or avionics, to communicate with one another. That stuff is not censored up. There's no full take data recording. And without that, you can't do incident response. You can't do active hunt. The existing data recorders that exist on aircraft, right? The crash hard data recorders, they're sampling the data, and they exist for crash analysis. Not very useful if you are an incident responder trying to figure out, hey, why did we have that glitch, and how do we know that the firmware and software on board is safe, is secure, came from the operator, especially when a lot of those updates are not cryptographically encrypted, signed, and there's no validation mechanism to ensure that you don't have a bad load on board, right? So we started the company focusing on cybersecurity for all of those reasons. And along the way, we realized that, candidly, cybersecurity is the first requirement to fall off and the last one to come on when there's a budget conversation. And this is true whether we're talking about a commercial or a federal, customer. despite sensitivities that may be a little bit different in one community than the other. But we realized that when we wanted to solve that observability problem, we built this infrastructure, this middleware, hardware and software that has to live on vehicle and be multi-protocol and suck everything down, do a bunch of really sophisticated edge computing. You have to update all the software to constantly be able to decode and make sense of the data that's flowing across. Then you got to get it off the vehicle, you got to centralize it, you got to make sense of it there, you got to run sophisticated anomaly detection and classification rules and logic on top of all of that, and then you got to feed the alerts and indications into systems that can be congruent with the way that like a security operations center and their teams know how to ingest that. But when we built all of that, we were like, wait a second, we're harnessing sensor data on these platforms that's never been collected before on behalf of our mission partners and customers. And it's incredibly powerful when you have that kind of data. You can use that to advance your prognostics or predictive maintenance programs, to enhance your operational readiness, because no longer are you just looking at fault data, a computer saying, hey, I've got this problem. Well, that was an engineer that years before thought, hey, if there's a problem, send an alert indication out that says that you've got that issue, right?
Right.
But what about all of the things that somebody didn't care to program in as a precondition or a fault beforehand, right? So now you can train ML algorithms and statistical models and a whole host of different techniques to identify failure cases before they apply. When you can bring the maintainers or the operators of a system, they'll fall under the chief operating officer typically in an airline or in a railroad, to the table and get them excited about the same solution that enhances safety and empowers the cybersecurity team to be able to extend their IT experience and standard operating procedures into that operational domain. Well, now you've got a 2-for-1.
Right. And
that 2-for-1 makes that that capital investment conversation possible. So that's been a part of our story, and it's something that in I think the service to really just the community and a national security that we want to share with everybody. We see that as imperative to solving the larger problem, which is, I see another one coming right here. We've got a regional airliner flying by behind me, landing at DCA, and the truth of the matter is that there's no antivirus or intrusion detection or intrusion prevention that exists today on airliners, just as one specific example. And that's not the world that I want my children to grow up in, because I'm just convinced sooner or later, somebody's going to start hacking those just like they have everything else.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time with the Teslas and all the cars. Again, we just came from DEF CON, where they have an entire car hacking village and an aviation village. Like, it's not impossible, from the voting machines to everything else. Like, if you can program it, then somebody can find a work around it. And if you're not monitoring for it and you don't know what good looks like, you won't know that bad is happening, right? You have to know what good looks like to be able to find bad and do something about it, unless you're waiting until the ride of bang, and then you're just chasing your tail trying to stop it from happening again, right? But understanding and trying to get in that process and know what good looks like, and hey, these are the known good things, that's an intuitive to understanding in these OT spaces how these systems work, and being able to tie everything together to know I need to know how to run it operationally, but also need to know what I'm looking for bad actors or bad events. Stuxnet being a great example of that, right? Is everything looked fine to the operators, but in the background something bad was happening.
Exactly. Yeah, especially when malware masquerades as environmental or maintenance faults or indications when it's physically manifesting itself, right? So you said a bunch of things that get me really excited, right? That known good, we call that a baseline. Right. And baselining and data bus monitoring or onboard network monitoring is a practice that, again, when you look at it as an agnostic capability, it's not necessarily a security thing or a maintenance thing. It can be both. Right. So that's really exciting. That there's a strong thread between doing baselining very effectively and building a virtual twin. And something that we've learned along the way is that An aircraft is not an aircraft. Every single aircraft is unique, is different. Even when they come off the factory one after the other, they're going to have, when you sample and collect the data at the levels that we do at Shift 5, you will notice these minute differences in timing, in the way that one box responds to a request from another box. Cable harnesses and lengths will have different signal characteristics that will manifest itself in the data collection, both analog and digital. And so you can use that to create these really fine fingerprints on a per vehicle basis, and then use that to monitor for change. A really interesting research problem, though, is when you're retrofitting an existing fleet, how do you know what known good is when it's been in service for a long time? How do you know that it hasn't already somehow been compromised through physical access or supply chain or whatever the case is? There's a really interesting set of technologies that we're employing here at Shift 5 and partnered with others and watching both the research and development community develop as well to get after that problem. But it's an exciting time to be an OT, and I think that there's no better security conversation than OT, because the difference between the vehicles that we're talking about being hacked and IT cyber attacks is that by nature, some type of attack against an OT asset causes a physical outcome in the world.
Right.
Often with potentially serious outcomes, and attacking that problem and defending our mission partners' interests and our national interests is what gets us out of bed every day. It's what makes us excited to come to work. That and the ability to get to see so many different platforms and the diversity of architectures and technology. This is a really cool space, but I'm probably explaining to your audience what they already know because they're listening to you, Aaron.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that, right? So OT is so vast, and two plants or two engines or vehicles, they can be created identical. On paper, they look the same, but they have these different responses. And to your point, it's so vastly different than the IT space. IT, the worst thing that happens is you lose your mail server or your SharePoint server, or not that those aren't bad things. Maybe it's your accounting system. You can't bill. But that physical, from being just a virtual thing to something happening in the physical world, you start bringing into safety, environmental, all of these other factors and components that, you're looking at a power plant. And if I bring down a turbine and it blows the turbine up, yes, maybe I lose life, but let's pretend that I don't. It's still 18 months to 2 years before I can replace that thing, right? It's not just buying another server off the shelf and reloading it from a backup and getting it back up and running. Same thing with, an airliner. Let's say that the airliner blows up and nobody's in it. I still have a physical piece of equipment that is now destroyed, and I can't replace that. Now, maybe I've got some spares, but that domino can easily be triggered to hit other things and cause bigger problems. And we've seen replications of that with, substations being shot and taken down, and how that impacts the grid in a certain regional area. Or in Texas, where I live, when cold spells happen and we start getting rolling brownouts and blackouts, and how that impacts everything else. You can't pump gas. You can't do all of these other basic things because of these impacts to these OT systems, which, again, if I'm in an airplane, I want to make sure that it's working. And when my kids are in an airplane, I want to make sure that it's working, and we know what known good is. And because OT is so old, probably 75% of the fleet of anything that you think of in OT is probably considered old. It's already running. It's got, antiquated systems, and most of the OT environment is going to have to be retrofitted or managed or understood from where it is. And to your point, how do I understand? How do I know that what I have right now isn't already compromised?
Yeah, Aaron, it's interesting. In the aerospace world, we call old flight proven, and we keep going back to it because it just works.
Right.
There's an interesting set of certification, I think, challenges from the perspective of a security professional that exist because of stringent safety requirements, flight safety requirements, and exist for really, really good reasons, but that make it difficult to upgrade, patch, improve, firmware and software in an aerospace context. I think that, the things that actually concern me are actually not like airliners being hacked out of the sky.
Right.
I don't push a FUD argument, right? But
Yeah.
I worry about somebody hacking some avionics, and this bubbling up and resulting in a type grounding, kind of like
Right.
we saw with the MAX fleet after the tragedies ensued with what was effectively a software flaw,
Sure.
and a flaw in certification. A type grounding of one of the more common aircraft fleets would have pretty serious economic impacts on the aviation industry, on our economy, and it doesn't necessarily have to put lives at risk in order to have individual impacts to everybody, every single one of your listeners, especially any of us with any money in a retirement account. So those are, I think, the more likely scenarios that the aerospace industry has actually experienced in one form or another over the last couple of years. And so that's, getting back to DEF CON, that's why I was so excited to see all of the energy around the Aerospace Village, just as one specific example, and the ICS Village as another. To see the big OEMs leading, CTFs, like Boeing was leading the Aviation Village Capture the Flag exercise, and SpaceX was there. TSA actually gave a phenomenal talk on how they're working with regulators in both the airline and rail space to help mediate the conversation between safety and security, which mean two different things and have different regulatory bodies with very different sets of experiences and different workforces with different expertise, but that have to really come together to close the gap between those two conversations and address the concerns and issues. To see all of that come together gives me a lot of encouragement and a lot of hope that we can continue to, I think, as a community, advance these interests and stay ahead of the threat. That's really the name of the game.
Yeah, and we've seen it in a lot of the critical infrastructure. I mean, you can compare some from NERC SIP in the utility space, and I would say they're more advanced in their footprint because of that regulation, because they understand what they need to do. It helps them with that baseline, and they're also able to get funding. Where some of the wastewater, even rail has kind of lagged behind because there hasn't been that guidance, that requirement, that minimum baseline that they're having to do. And it's not because these entities are not interested in these things. Some of them it's just because it's hard to find funding. There's a lot of factors that go into this. They've got older equipment and gear that's running these systems, and there's a lot of things that go into protecting these environments, as we know, because it's not as easy as just replacing all this equipment and just rip and replace or patching. And again, the way we do things in OT is vastly different than IT, and because of all these really complex things. So I'd love to hear about, how you talked about some of the software things. Get to the crux of the hardware. Like, what does y'all's product do? Like, where does it fit, and how does it work to really understand what's going on in these spaces, to be able to see that data where sensors didn't exist before?
Yeah, so it really starts on the vehicle. We build a couple different versions of hardware. We have a ruggedized military-grade little box that we can swap out internal components to make it talk and receive data from any of the different on-vehicle protocols that we find, and everything from ground combat vehicles to attack helicopters to manned and unmanned aircraft and even naval assets. So that box, obviously, it's military grade, and it's got all the environmental certs and everything. So we configure that and work with program managers and OEMs to get it integrated and installed in military vehicles. And it is our edge computer, it's our mission processor, it's our software host. And what it does is it literally listens and sucks up all the data from onboard data buses. On systems where we can go active, it can provide intrusion prevention and even recovery capabilities for those onboard LRUs and data buses. But its principal job is to be a sensor, a multi-protocol, modular, open architecture sensor. On that, we layer software in that does the data collection, data enrichment, data compression and storage, data transmission to over different telemetry and data links that we integrate with, and real-time anomaly detection. And that anomaly detection actually gets pretty sophisticated. We build a layer cake with a secure foundation of protocol validation and interface control documentation validation, and then timing analysis, mode validation, bounds checking, all of these kind of deterministic, provable techniques to identify a lot of low-hanging fruit. And then we layer on increasingly sophisticated non-deterministic techniques. And I'll kind of pause there because that's where a lot of the the tailoring and the secret sauce is, but that's built on a per vehicle basis in collaboration with the OEMs and in the program or project manager or the fleet owner. And again, those exist for a variety of different use cases, like I mentioned before: safety, security, operational readiness, integrations with other systems for optimization in an operational context, whatever. But at the end of the day, we got to get those alert indications and all of the data. You got to collect all of the data all of the time. And have it appropriately watermarked, right? You got to get it off the vehicle, and you have to centralize it at the fleet view, into some type of accessible and secure cloud infrastructure. And that's typically the customer's infrastructure, whatever it may be. But when we get it there, it's got to be decoded, translated, and this is all time series data, and so it has to be basically dumped into a single data store and made accessible so that data scientists, analysts, security researchers, organic or external, to that fleet owner, can use that data and make sense of it for whatever their mission is. Again, security, safety, operations, whatever. We also have, we will rerun the analytics there to identify anomalies across the fleet. So we can say, well, this is interesting. Like, we're seeing something change that's normally not it's not unnormal on an individual vehicle basis, but it's only happening to these assets in this geographic area, or over this particular time period, or after this new maintenance update, took. Isn't that interesting? Let's surface that kind of information so that the operational impact of that can be assessed and people can take appropriate action. That entire infrastructure is really complicated and hard to set up. It requires sustainment, and that's what we specialize in doing, especially for vehicles. Actually, any of the ones that we support, they're constantly being upgraded.
Right.
New systems are being added to them. Their configurations are changing, and so we do all of the grunt work to make sure that those translation tables and the rules are constantly updated, that the baselines are constantly updated and valid, doing the testing to make sure that there are no false positives, with updated techniques being rolled out. There's this constant support and churn that goes into it. Just like, with an IDS or an antivirus solution, there's a team that constantly has to be upgrading the models and the signatures. We provide all that service support so that the teams can focus on whatever their use case is. If it's operations, they want to focus on that. If it's security, we want to enable them to get out of the grunt work and to the data engineering and the data piping and the baselining, and get back to security management and get out of the foxholes so that they can look around, if you will, and spot the targets and engage.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, obviously, like you just went through all that, right? It's super complex. You're talking about assets that are physically moving. They're all over the world. They're flying, they're driving, whatever they may be doing, and you're sending data back and you're analyzing all this stuff. And And the whole point of that is to get it to something that is user accessible, that commander or that manager or that supervisor, whatever the title may be, depending on the vertical, they can take action. They can know what I'm looking at without understanding the ML or any of the complex understanding of how the baselines became. They need to be able to take action upon what they're seeing and know, do I need to take action, shut this thing down, or update, whatever that may be, and the quicker they can respond and understand the data that they're looking at, the more valuable it is to them in the first place, right?
Aaron, absolutely. And the key that we have found there is to do a lot of the classification work up front for these anomalies, to assign priorities and severity levels to them, and then to associate them with runbooks or standard operating procedures or mitigations. And also plotting all of this on a graphic user interface so that people can graphically see in a system view and in an operations view what a specific alert actually means in the context of a subsystem. Does this alert have something to do with affecting, mobility of a particular component, and is mobility being one of the more important subsystems, for example, in aerospace.
Sure.
If flight control and and engine systems are not operational, like or if there's a glitch, you want to be a lot more sensitive to that, because you got to find and identify and fix that stuff before you take off, before what the engineers in the industry call weight off wheels, or weight on wheels, right? So, it's interesting. We've learned a tremendous amount, and one of our superpowers has been working in both the the defense and the federal space and the commercial space, because each has very different perspectives on some things, and they complement the other when we can transfer certain knowledge and know-how, which we see as part of our mandate as being a conduit and helping talk across those lines. In our view, we see a lot of commonality between, for example, DoD Air Force assets and naval aviation, Army aviation assets, Marine aviation assets, and the airlines. And in some cases, many of our airlines are actually, members of the civil reserve or auxiliary fleet. The nation in a time of war, can mobilize our, segments of our critical infrastructure, and some of these companies can donate. And I think recently during the Afghan evacuations, some of the airlines, were called up and contributed planes to help fly people back from second hops. So the Air Force would get folks out of Afghanistan, and then, you might be taking a flight on a commercial airliner back to the U.S. for assimilation and reception. So I see, in my view, that civil infrastructure is an extension of national defense infrastructure, and vice versa. And so where we can, we try to do our part to share information and break down silos and make sure that the right people, are equipped with the best intelligence.
So what does it look like to onboard a new asset? Maybe one that you haven't done before, a different platform, a different environment, vertical, whatever. What does that look like? Is that obviously it's not overnight. It's obviously you got to plug in the hardware and start looking at the data and start seeing what's there. Again, like I said before, you got to understand what good looks like before you start finding bad. What does that process look like?
Yeah, so it typically involves us coming out and sitting down with the chief engineers or chief architects of a particular system, or if it's an operator, it's going to be maintenance, operations, and security folks all on the table. So you'll have kind of a multidisciplinary kickoff meeting. We're going to review all technical documentation available, reach out to the OEM. Fortunately, we have amazing relationships with most of the major vehicle OEMs in the industries that we serve, and so we'll help bring them to the table and do things collaboratively with them. But after you gather all that technical documentation, we start working out mechanical and electrical connections and interface to fit the sensor. Come up with a certification path. That's really important in commercial aerospace, especially.
Sure.
You have to get a supplemental type certification anytime you put new hardware and software on a plane, and so we have specific gear that's going through FAA cert now that makes it faster and easier to do that on different civil aircraft types. And then we start also working the data engineering. Once we get sensors and systems in place and we start flowing data back, then we work on data translation, normalization, baselining, anomaly detection, and then we start working with the teams to develop SOPs and run books and really figure out the so what, right, in the SOC or in the operations or dispatch center, so that we can service both of those communities and get that 2-for-1, right? If you see X, then do Y. A lot of this work is complementary to efforts that have been underway in a lot of these companies and across the DoD for a long time when it comes to like predictive maintenance, logistics, telematics. So there's some handrails that we kind of follow along the way, but it's collaborative. It can be pretty technical when we get down into the weeds, and we nerd out on the data, and especially on the security threats and ensuring that the data can be used to address those. And at the same time, we learn as much as we can, typically with a partner, to figure out how to operationalize this data in a maintenance or an operations context for that specific customer. And then we try and quantify, the wins. What are the maintenance saves? How do we quantify that and make our stakeholders look good in terms of ROI from a safety perspective or from an operations metrics perspective that's easy to quantify, so that we can push that back up and make our stakeholders look good in a board conversation or what have you.
That is so powerful. That right there, what you just said. I mean, it's so powerful because you look at all of the Black Hat, all the vendors that were at Black Hat, and there's all these different products and capabilities and software and hardware and all these different things. But how do I understand, how do I justify that this is the right thing for me, that what I did, so I pitch it, I tell my board I need it, this is how much it's going to cost, we implement it over 3 years, and at the end of that, I've got some dashboards. But how do I tie that back to my operations? How am I more efficient? How was I safer? How did I save lives? How did I save equipment? How did I, what can I link that back to? And everything comes back to, finance and what did it cost me and what did I save and how was I more efficient? Like all of those things need to tie together, and so few cyber specifically, but even just startups, et cetera, they're not tying those things back, and all those things matter, right? We don't just do cyber for cyber's sake. Like if it wasn't a risk and if it wasn't, an impact to our operations, we wouldn't do it. We're not just doing it because it's fun. Like, yes, we enjoy it. We geek out on it. Yes, it's fun, right? But it doesn't make sense unless it makes sense. I go into having a lot of conversations this past week at DEF CON and explaining to people that don't necessarily understand OT why you can't just patch everything, and why there's really old systems running these really critical processes, and why it's not necessarily the right answer to just go rip them out and put something new in, and how that isn't always the right answer, right? And it's hard to understand when you haven't been in that space and you haven't seen it firsthand and really understand it, and trying to explain that to people that come from a different world and come from IT and come from maybe education, it's hard to really grasp that. Why am I putting this critical process on a Windows XP machine or a system that's 30 years old? It's a tough nut to crack, but tying all those things back to that ROI is very powerful in making them look good, as well as showing value and continuing to push the needle in the right direction.
Aaron, I couldn't agree anymore. I think that the so what matters, right? And those measures of effectiveness, measures of performance, and return on investment are really key. So I'm very fortunate. I am surrounded here at Shift 5 by a very professional and experienced program management and field engineering and customer success team, and so that's been really key to our success. Understanding early on and documenting, what are the customers' metrics that they want to show, and the things that they need to, that we need to measure ourselves against as we are, custom deploying and tailoring this solution, to their needs. I think that the difference when you talk about OT products is that, as I described the totality of our system and our products, right, you heard how it has to be implemented and really tailored to, the enterprise. It's like SAP, or one of these other like massive, and crucial software applications. You got to get the training right. You have to get the business practices right for the full utility to be realized. In the military, we have this really complicated acronym called DOTMLPF, TACP, which stands for Doctrine, I'm going to get this wrong, Doctrine, DOT, operations, training, material solutions, think logistics, facilities, policy. I'm missing a couple things in there, right? But the point, they look at the workforce, even, I have the right workforce. We take a total look at the solution, and we are very fortunate to be in a position to offer the service support to coach people along the way to make the product maximally effective. Because when it gets, when you make the capital investment necessary to censor up a OT fleet of vehicles, you've really got to wring out that value very quickly to make that capital investment worth it. And all of these ancillary components are keys to maximizing that investment. We're very conscious of that.
Yeah, that's powerful. Again, just really understanding that and being able to push that through, and the fact that you've done it, you've shown that value, and then they continue to see that value, because it's once you get that value, you can continue to squeeze that better. You can get more efficient. You can show more of that. The longer it sits, the more you're going to know about the process. The more you're going to, as you add and bolt things on, this just continues to get more and more. Have you guys started working from the beginning? So it's just like anything else, right? As these new systems are being designed and engineered, how do you get in front before it's done? So you're not retrofitting, you're not learning after the fact, you're part of the build process.
Bottom line up front, baking in product security, baking in full take data collect from the beginning is cheaper than it is to retrofit solutions. You can be smarter about size, weight, power impacts, right? You don't need to necessarily add a new mission computer like we're talking about. A little 3-pound black box is still a lot more weight than a fighter pilot would prefer to carry on his plane. Sure. Every pound to a fighter pilot is a little bit less performance, right? So some of our most demanding mission partners are like ultra conscious about size, weight, and power impacts. So from the very beginning, we realized that that need and desire among some customers, and when we can work with OEMs and system integrators early in new clean sheet designs, we can just offer software solutions that live on existing appropriate hardware that has the right compute, storage, and critically the right input, output, or data bus accesses to all that key cyber terrain. And we can basically just integrate our entire system in without there being like an additional box having to be introduced. Or the other way, they say, hey, you know what, I want to use your box. I appreciate that you guys overspec it and that it's upgradable, and maybe I want to run additional software applications in a containerized form factor, and you can provide the host for that in a secure operating environment. That's another conversation that we are actually having with several integrators. So you can kind of go either way, right? Software only, hardware optional on edge, or hardware hosted. Enabling any kind of data offloading mechanism, cache and recover later, cache and forward when you have comms availability because maybe you're in and out of comms,
sure,
or streaming at various levels depending on your bandwidth availability. All of that is customized, and it makes for a really exciting job for our sales engineers and for our field engineers. I mean, you could just imagine the number of options that we get to present to a system architect, but what gets me really excited is watching that process, the tailoring, process happen. As a nerd, it's just really cool because you can imagine all the disciplines that come together. Our DoD customers present our most challenging, system integrations and operational environments that they need things to operate in, and then to be able to take like the best practices there and bring it back to civil aerospace or rail has been a real privilege.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of the differences I think that in OT that really stands out is I have to be able to be very flexible in my architecture and collection methods and all of these things, because your fleet is going to be, whether it's power plants or trains or cars or whatever it is, I'm going to have some variation. Very unlikely that we bought all of the exact same model on the same day and my entire fleet is that, right? I'm going to have everything from 100 years ago to last night, right? And everything in between. And to your point, even two that rolled off the assembly line right next to each other are going to be different. I bought different components, or the wiring was shielded differently, or there's different cable links, and all of these differences make a little bit of difference in how they show up and how they react and how they respond, and we have to be able to adjust for that. And also situations as I bolt additional systems onto it after the fact, that's always going to change things. And as you said, these platforms are never static. They're constantly adding things to, again, whether it's a weapon system or it's a train, like I'm constantly getting more efficiencies and adding more capabilities and enhancements. And you need to be able to ingest that. You need to be able to look at that. You need to be able to understand it so that you can do the same thing for those new additional systems. So being able to be flexible makes everything better, but also makes you able to stay in that realm of value add, no matter what system they add on before or after.
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, when you make a capital investment in something as expensive as locomotives or aircraft or any of the military weapon systems, you're going to modernize those over their lifespan, their operational lifespan. You're going to repower or drop in new engines and control in electronic control systems onto locomotives. You're going to recapitalize your fleet, as they say. Which makes complete sense, but it also presents these like tremendous baselining challenges and chip challenges. So we have invested a lot of time and money and effort into automated means that still require human checks,
Sure.
to make sure that we're flexible enough for that. But that's some of what makes this job interesting, but actually very difficult. But I think being on such a diversity of systems has helped us figure out how to offer that, that solution, if you will, a lot more economically than, candidly, when we've seen some folks try and, roll their own. Not that I'm saying that's not the way to go. That might
Sure.
be the only way to accomplish the mission for certain mission partners, but, we figured out how to generalize the problem, and that's been a key to our success.
Yeah, I mean, you get the benefit of seeing this similar problem in multiple verticals and multiple implementations and being able to learn from all of those things. Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, you're learning, and every time you get a little bit better, you get a little bit more knowledge. And, we've seen that over here, like you said before, like I can bring those lessons learned across. So this new customer is benefiting on all of the other things that we learned. It's that meme where the guy comes in and he hits the hammer and fixes the thing in 5 seconds, and it's $100,000 bill. And it's like, I'm paying you $100,000 for 5 seconds? No, you're paying me $100,000 for the 20 years of experience that I knew to hit that in the right spot so that it would work. It just only took me 5 seconds because I've done this so long, right? You're paying for the experience and the understanding more than just the time on target. It's going to take me longer to figure it out than it will for you to walk in and do it, because you have all the experience already, and your team has seen those things, which makes it powerful. It's that 10x multiplier that I can get that ROI that much quicker by outsourcing.
Aaron, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, again, that's the power of us being a dual-use company. I hope to see more venture-backed, dual-use companies pop up and serve both, defense and commercial markets. I think there's tremendous value. There's a flywheel effect and a feedback cycle there that's good for everybody involved. It's interesting. I want to touch on a strange, challenge that we hear in the industry all the time. People say, well, some of these companies that we interact with, and especially in the government, there's very conservative and risk mitigating, kind of attitude around acquisition, as there should be, and there's very good reasons for that behavior. But a lot of people ask, well, I want to know what the value is that I'm going to get from this, right? How valuable is this data that we can suck out of the vehicles? And it's impossible for anybody to answer that question until you actually go out, capture the data, translate the data, see what's there, and associate it with existing operations or safety or security problems. And often we find that our customers have never done full take data collection on all of the data buses, or at least the key data buses on their fleets before. Or if they have, they don't know how to make sense of that data. They haven't done an integration with the OEM or the system integrator. They don't have a shaman or the expertise maybe in the company to do the data analysis and the discovery to associate the opportunity with current problems that they're facing. And so we get stuck in this. I want to guarantee that I'm going, that this is going to be successful. But with so many unknowns, anybody that tells you that they can guarantee an outcome, I will caution, is selling you snake oil. We caution all of this to say, one, full take data collection and intrusion detection is not a panacea to cyber attacks. It's a cyber sensor. It's a countermeasure. It's a mitigation. But just like antivirus didn't save us, and IDSs, IPSs don't save us, right? It has to be part of a layered, holistic approach to the security model. But it's the same thing, right? Better data collection just enables better insights, into your maintenance. I think any data scientist would agree in 2023 that more data, fully. I think that the technical terms are, translated and groomed or cleaned data is going to be better because of the techniques that we have to exploit that data today. That wasn't, I think, the case 5 or 10 years ago.
Right.
A lot of people could credibly say a decade ago, hey, more data is not better. I'm going to increase storage and I'm going to increase compute costs and I'm not going to know how to make sense of that. Well, that's not the case today with modern technology. More data, better when it comes to maintenance and operations, returns. But you can't really ascertain what you're going to get until you do it. And so, we started a couple years ago by kind of offering a pilot opportunity. You can dip your toe in and make a small investment and deploy this on a subset of the fleet. And we can prove out a couple measures of effectiveness or performance and show how this will scale to allow people to reduce risks, acquisition risk, integration risk, maybe organizational risks, because there are organizational risks when you get, CISO, CIO equities using the same platform as COO equities, right?
Sure.
So that's been, I think, a secret to our success, and it's been a way that we've been able to help, some of our customers illuminate the opportunity.
That's impressive. I mean, again, it goes back to really understanding the business. It doesn't always tie to, the cyber risk or the nation state attack and all the things that that sell newspapers and click links and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, what make business turn is understanding what the risk is and being able to rationalize that and understand it. I'm putting my name on the line, which is why I want to make sure that this is going to make sense, right? But to your point, I can't guarantee this is going to, I don't know how bad your systems are. You may be the one off that your systems are so efficient that we're not going to find anything. It's unlikely, but it's possible, right? But then when you get in there and you find those things and you just don't know what you're going to uncover, and there's no way to guarantee that stuff. So I love that perspective, and that turnaround is you're not a used car salesman. You're not trying to sell them, hey, what payment do you want, right? You're not trying to give them that and just tell them what they want to hear to sign on the dotted line. You can show them, and there's real world examples, but what value you brought from company A doesn't necessarily translate to them, and that's what they need to understand, right? Is their system and their processes are different, and it's going to depend on how their systems work. So I love that.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. Give me some positive and maybe something scary in the next 5 to 10 years. What's something that you're looking forward to, maybe positively on the cyber aspect? Maybe you just hit on a few of them, and maybe something that maybe has you concerned coming up over the horizon.
Yeah, Aaron, I'm really excited about some of the work that's being done in the research community in terms of automatic bug identification, vulnerability identification and classification, and integrating those tools into the development process. I think that the way that we've been doing software development and testing from a product security perspective is about to change. So I think that the suppliers, right, the folks that make avionics components and write the software for it, are, have available to them now, and in the next 2 years, I think we're going to see a tremendous transformation, especially with the advent of large language models and code verification, formal verification techniques being automated, against code bases. It's going to make the software that is deployed into the world more secure by nature, and that's going to close, certain access vectors and risk or attack surface that we're carrying today. What concerns me, though, is that there are certain industries that, because of safety lessons learned, we have safety processes that actually are impediments to implementing things like quick patching or upgrades. And I'm speaking specifically about aerospace, right? So today there really is not an effective patching policy, process, you name it, that allows the tier one suppliers and the OEMs to push out software updates in the kind of time frames and horizons that we have become accustomed to in the IT space. And my concern is that as OT continues to capture more and more attention from threat actors, that our ability to patch and respond may be hampered actually by accreditation and certification processes that have been very good from a safety perspective and are intentionally slow, but maybe don't provide the speed, flexibility, and agility. And we have to figure out some way how to marry these together. I think there are really smart people trying to solve this right now in the regulatory agencies and in the standards bodies, on the industry side. But none of that has come out yet as effective policy that can really be put into action. And so there's a gap there, and I want to see that gap close as much as possible. So that's the thing that gets me excited, and at the same time, something kind of related. That's a concern, and if we can rectify that, this is a policy problem. I think that we can do a lot to respond to threats and threat intelligence as we learn about new issues.
Yeah, and to your point though, it's really these processes and these safety reasons, they've been there for the longest time because it was the best that we had. And as our tools get better, we need to be able to adjust those things, not avoiding or ignoring the safety concerns, but hey, we have better tools and we have better ways to validate those things without putting safety at risk or any more at risk. And actually, by not being able to do it quicker, we're actually adding or risking our safety instead of being able to adjust. So yeah, that's huge in this space. And as more attacks happen so quickly, and now with machine learning and AI, also on the attack side, our adversaries are using that against us as well. They're going to be able to find loopholes and everything. They're going to be using those tools against us. So we can't sit idly by and do the things that we did 20 years ago just because that's the way we used to do it.
Aaron, absolutely.
So this is your time. What is the call to action? How do people get involved? Find out more about you, about Shift 5, where you guys are going to go, all the things.
Well, I mean, Aaron, if any of your guests are interested in having a call with us, just a discovery call, or to have a quick consultation on how we might be able to help with censoring up fleets for security or better data collection for maintenance and operations readiness, they can reach out to us, www.shift5. That's shift spelled out the number 5.io, shift5.io. They can reach out to us via LinkedIn or any of the social channels. We'll follow up. We're just really excited to share with people this principle. I guess my bottom line up front, or my takeaway is, we encourage everybody to seriously consider doing full take data collection on your critical OT data buses. and ensuring that you can get all that data centralized from your fleet assets into one place, decode, translate that, and start to monitor that. We think that there's tremendous benefits for that. We've discussed for the last hour, but I think hiding behind an air gap fallacy and not instrumenting or censoring your systems is just going to accrue a tremendous or unacceptable amount of risk in the years to come. So we just encourage everybody to make sure that they're tapping and monitoring everything, not just that IT infrastructure, but that ICS, SCADA, and OT. Those legacy and serial protocols that are really obscure. We just want everybody to make sure that they can see themselves so that they can defend their interests. Thanks, Aaron.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time today, sir. It was a great conversation. Hopefully next time we're at a conference together, we'll actually be able to shake hands, have a beer, or something like that. So,
beer on me, Aaron. Thank you. It was a real pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast. If you got some valuable information from today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Aaron and to get your free copy of the OT Cybersecurity Solution Buyer's Guide, go to industrialdefender.com. That's industrialdefender.com, or you can click the link in the show notes.